Good afternoon, everybody here on the East Coast. Good morning out west, or perhaps early evening, since we have a global audience attending us today. My name is Joel Reed. I'm the Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Robotics Network. Really happy to have everybody join us here today. We have a really large turnout, which I think is a strong indication of what's happening in the construction industry with the introduction of robotic solutions and autonomous capabilities. Real quick, I want to tell you about the Pittsburgh Robotics Network. We represent one of the world's largest robotics communities with over 100 members. These companies represent nearly 18 different industry segments, 9 of which have 5 robotics companies or more in an industry segment. Many of you might know about Carnegie Mellon University's leadership in computer science, robotics research, and development, and artificial intelligence, but lesser known is the breadth and the depth of Pittsburgh's commercial community. With all of this, we actually consider Pittsburgh to be the robotics capital of the world. And it is the PRN's mission to connect many of you that have joined us today in the audience with this rapidly growing community, and then connect our community to industry networks. And we aim to work together to accelerate the overall adoption of autonomous systems. So I encourage you to check us out at robopgh.org to learn more and connect with us. Today, we're going to talk about this very rapidly rising demand for autonomous solutions in construction. This is part of the Pittsburgh Robotics Network's Robotics Business Spotlight Series. And in that series, we aim to highlight business challenges, successes that we're seeing in nascent industries, and even failures in the robotics field. Robotics in constructions is an emerging industry. Thus, we feel like it's very important to bring together users and developers, vendors, and other industry influencers. And we want to understand the driving demand for these solutions, talk about the use cases, and have a discussion about the challenges so you can take some insights away. Before we start, I want to recognize our leading sponsors. These companies are known leaders in research, business, and robotics development. The organizations are listed here. In many ways, they are representative of the Pittsburgh robotics community and leaders in their respective industries. We have our founding sponsors who provided both fiscal and hands-on support to launch and sustain our organization. CMU, the esteemed institution that has started much of this for many of us. Argo AI, which is a Ford-backed autonomous vehicle leader with deep roots in and a serious commitment to Pittsburgh. And then there are our sustaining sponsors, Aurora, which is another Pittsburgh pioneer and industry leader in autonomous vehicle solutions, who recently acquired Uber's self-driving unit. The Denton's Law Firm, which is the 5th largest law firm with a Pittsburgh office that has been leading the development of robotics and autonomous companies. And then JP Morgan, who assists our stakeholders with capital and banking needs, and also helps them build critical industry networks and developing and pursuing their strategic plans. And finally, the University of Pittsburgh with the Swanson School of Engineering and the School of Computer Science, which provide world-class research and engineering talent to our robotics cluster here nationally, but also internationally. And Jen's going to post a link in the chat as well. There's actually a team of Pitt students that'll be participating in next month Indy 500 Autonomous Challenge. I encourage you to take a look at that. It's really interesting what they and other teams are doing. Be sure to follow us on social. There's a benefit to these online webinars. It gives you the ability to multitask. So I encourage you to click on the LinkedIn and the Twitter links and follow us right now. I'm actually going to watch our follower account, so I expect to see that tick up during the panel discussion. A little bit of housekeeping. I'm sure we're all getting used to this now, but we ask that you use the Q&A feature for questions. We will monitor those throughout the presentation. Perhaps ask some of them during the conversation, but we will have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end to address any questions that haven't been chosen. So for today's event, we have 3 leaders in the construction field that are leading the development and adoption of autonomous systems. And this is in response to significant changes in this industry. I'm going to briefly introduce the panel but we will also post their LinkedIn profiles, and we have descriptions that were available on our event page. I encourage you to learn more about our panelists, and you can access that through the chat. So today I'd like to first introduce LaMar Childs. LaMar, thank you for joining us today. LaMar is president and CEO of LB Construction Enterprises. And he's a leader in so many ways. It's really hard for me to wrap my head around all that he's doing and driving in several different areas. I mean, not only is he an entrepreneur and business leader of a veteran-owned and minority-owned business in this field, but I'm learning that he's also a cybersecurity analyst and serves in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. So LaMar, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing about your experiences as a leader in this industry. Next, I want to introduce, thank you. I want to introduce Jeremy Searock, who's co-founder and president and CTO of Advanced Construction Robotics. I've just been getting to know Jeremy over the last couple of months, and very quickly, I hold him in extremely high regard as an entrepreneur, as a leader in this community of robotics companies, but also for the experience he has had across an impressive array of autonomous systems projects. And this includes off-road autonomous vehicles, autonomous ships, including the first ever self-driving US naval vessel. He also worked and contributed on the development of an autonomous Black Hawk helicopter and much more. So we're looking forward to hearing about your story with ACR Bots. And Jeremy also has served in the US military with the US Navy and worked at the Pittsburgh National Robotics Engineering Center, otherwise known as NREC. And I've asked LaMar and Jeremy not to go back and forth of the rivalry between Navy and the Air Force. So that'll be a separate session. And then finally, we have Stephen Muck. Stephen, hello, co-founder and chairman of Advanced Construction Robotics. Stephen has over 30 years experience in this industry and has started or acquired over 20 businesses and currently oversees approximately $200 million in revenue across several segments of the industry, including engineering, construction, demolition, commercial diving, and deep foundation installations, and also oil and gas projects. So I'm actually going to go ahead and start the conversation with Stephen. Because we know that many technology companies across different industries tend to start from within an academic institution. They might start out by addressing a specific engineering challenge or just pushing the boundaries of science. And then that technology is rolled out at the university and a team conducts a market scan to determine the best possible addressable market. This is called sometimes a tech in search of a solution. But we know that success tends to favor technology businesses that are started by industry insiders or someone who has a problem but is in search of a solution. Stephen, you followed this path, and I'm very interested in your story. Can you tell us how ACR was started, how you met Jeremy, and what your vision was for the company?
Sure, Joel. Thank you for the question and the introduction. The challenge in our industry has been one of probably the last 10 years where our productivities have been dropping and our labor force availability has been declining, and basically simple demographics of the baby boomers booming out of our industry and fewer young people interested in joining the construction industry. So 5 years ago, I was bidding a number of complicated large jobs in fairly rural areas. And one of the interesting things about contractors is we tend to be very optimistic. And one of the jobs we bid was going to require 40 people on rebar crews in a rural part of Pennsylvania. And while we were estimating that job and putting our pricing together, we had absolutely no idea where we were going to come up with that number of people in that location. But nonetheless, we bid the project. We ended up a second bidder on the project, so we weren't successful. But the week following that pursuit, I ended up at a Young Presidents Organization meeting at CMU where we had arranged to have a presentation of 6 or 7 emerging robotic technologies. And so I had the benefit of sitting in the audience and watching and learning about these emerging capabilities. And I came away from that meeting with a pretty clear picture that the technology had emerged to a point where we should be in a position to start solving problems in the heavy civil construction marketplace. And so following that meeting, I spent some time, considering the rebar situation because it was very labor intense. It required a spike in a workforce for a fairly short period of time. And it generally happened in the Northeast at the busiest times of year. So there weren't many people available. So it was a real conundrum, and ended up actually developing a prototype and proof of concept, and came to the conclusion that yes, the technology had converged to a point where we should be able to develop robotic solution.
And Stephen, did you develop that prototype with CMU? Had you met Jeremy at this point in the
No,
development?
actually not. At that point, I contracted with Carnegie Robotics to do the proof of concept for us. They did a nice job over a period of about 8 months. We were able to conclude that, and that was really the crossroad. So, after that period of time, we knew that we had something, and I also had numerous other ideas about robotic products and solutions for the construction industry. So I was faced with either another contract with Carnegie Robotics or building my own team, and decided, because of the backlog of ideas that I had about solutions, that I really wanted to build my own team. And that's when I started prospecting and looking around for the right people. And Jeremy and I met, and that was the beginning of Jeremy and my partnership to develop these robotic solutions.
So let's go ahead and move to Jeremy, and Jeremy, get your perspective that you have someone, you're working at the National Robotics Engineering Center, otherwise known as NREC, working on very sophisticated autonomous systems, and I think autonomous vehicle, research. And here's somebody coming from the construction industry. Can you just give us your perspective of when you first met, Stephen, and what prompted you to kind of leave that organization, become an entrepreneur, and commit to this industry?
Sure, Joel. There were several reasons of why I wanted to do it, and also with the some team members that came with me. One way to think about it is, we who've been in the industry for a while really know that this technology is going to have a huge impact in the world. And I think we knew that as a student body when I went to Carnegie Mellon in the early 2000s with Chris Urmson and really all of the leaders of the current autonomous vehicles work and other robotics companies. We really knew that this technology was going to have some monumental impact, but we just didn't know when that was going to happen. And so, when we were working at Carnegie Mellon at NREC, and of course Uber came and took some of us away to start Uber self-driving car efforts, it was like, okay, this is ready to happen. So I think a lot of us were really looking forward to creating products. Of course, at the universities, their focus is on basic research and applied research, and not necessarily making a product. So I was very excited, and so was the team that we have today, in creating a real product and seeing your baby, your robot, doing real work in the real world. So that was, maybe the main reason we were excited to do it. The second one was, I was, as you can imagine, a lot of opportunities were available to us at that time with all the autonomous car companies starting, right? So I was very particular in deciding, well, what venture should I jump on? And so I did my research and did my homework. Part of that's my Navy training of of checking off and making sure I thought through it. But so if you look at the construction industry, I mean, it's a 11.5 trillion a year industry, and there were just very few players from a robotics perspective in the market. So it was such a virgin, and I could just see the endless opportunities that this sort of technology has in really changing an industry. So at the grandest scale, I'm a military guy in the sense I like the greater purpose and trying to make an impact in the world. You really could see that we had the opportunity to absolutely transform, disrupt, or change an industry like only happens once every 100 years. So it was just looked like a fantastic opportunity.
Okay, that's great. And LaMar, just a brief introduction of how you came to know the team at Advanced Construction.
Sure. I was doing research, I'm constantly doing research on new things that are going on out there. And in that research, that is how I came across TieBot, kind of independently of that. And I look at things that are able to be not too complex. I mean, things that are able to be done over and over. And their product was able to do that, and also in multiple types of weather and things like that. So it made sense to me.
Okay, and we're certainly going to dive into that, a little bit more. And to all of you, I mean, Jeremy and Stephen, sometimes it seems timing is everything, but we've been talking about robotics applications for decades now, and so it really is this intersection of trends. Stephen, in your industry, the need for labor, increase in demand, for construction. Obviously, we're going to talk about, or I'll ask about the infrastructure bill, but also is the readiness of the technology, and I think that's one of the reasons why we saw this emerge. So, Jeremy, you mentioned this is almost a $12 trillion industry. Right now, it's a little bit smaller in terms of robotics applications, but it's projected to grow to almost $250 million, depending upon which reports you're looking at. But it's on a steep growth curve. So Stephen, let me start with you. Can you expand a little bit more of what's driving demand? And another stat that we just saw recently that we think by 2025, they project 7,000 robots to be in the industry doing construction tasks. So what is driving this demand and leading you into this path of transformation?
I think there's a number of factors that are driving it. Clearly, labor availability or skilled labor availability has moved into the bright lights, at this stage for all of us. 3 or 4 years ago, when we were talking about shortages of labor related to the heavy civil construction industry, we were kind of beating a drum, alone as an industry. And I think in the last 18 months, it's become apparent to all of us in our daily endeavors that there's, labor shortages everywhere. And those labor shortages, simply highlight the skilled labor gap that we have in heavy civil construction or the construction industry in general. So clearly labor is part of it, but there's also a desire for increased productivity, reduced costs, increased safety. And so our robots are focused on labor intense activities that generate more injuries than typical. A lot of those stem from repetitive motion. A lot of them stem from, walking on uneven surfaces and trips and falls, and, lower back injuries from lifting and carrying heavy objects repetitively. So focusing on, what appears to be a fairly simple task of initially tying rebar was a boost in productivity, is a reduction in the need for people, and allows the people that we do have to move into higher skilled areas where we have, demand, and where the tasks really can only be accomplished at this stage of technological development by humans. So we're focusing our efforts on productivity enhancing activities that have the need, frankly, to incorporate the lowest level of technological convergence and innovation and the largest economic impact on those job sites.
I want to explore that a little bit further. I mean, LaMar, you talked about having a simplistic view of what an automated solution can do in a construction environment. And Jeremy, I think that you'll enter into this question as well. Robotic solutions can be, and the applications of this technology can be extremely sophisticated. But in deploying a new technology in the marketplace and building a business around it, focus is really important. First, LaMar, can you just talk about the types of tasks that you felt were ripe for automation and why that was?
Certainly. So we obviously are talking about the tying of rebar. That's one element. There's some other products that we may get into that TieBot has as well, but ultimately it's those things that you're doing consistently. You're carrying rebar, you've got to place that rebar, and you've got to tie it. So if you are able to have a machine that's consistently able to tie that rebar, it's not just tying the rebar. When you've got bridge decks, these things are hundreds of feet wide, several hundred feet long or greater. You might even have a mile or two. That is something that someone has to do over and over and over and over again. If you have that machine that's able to go out and do that, then I'm able to take my crews, move them to something else. So whereas you had 40 guys that were working on something, now you can have those guys spread out across other projects. And so that's the thing that was quite phenomenal for me. The other thing that we were looking at was getting rebar out onto bridge decks. So you've got bars that are 20 and 30 feet long that guys are carrying. And each time they take a step, it's an opportunity for somebody to fall. If you've got 2 people carrying, got 3 people carrying, one person stumbles, now you've got potential for 2 or 3 people to go down. So those are things that I look at the tasks that we have to do on a daily basis. And I'm saying, okay, how can we make these things safer? How can we do them faster? Because that's another thing. A lot of times that takes up crane time. A general contractor doesn't want to wrap up their crane trying to get that rebar out there. So even though it'll go in the contracts and everything like that, when push comes to shove, they're like, oh, we had to move the crane out. So this product and this solution was, a godsend for me from that standpoint.
Okay. And let's talk about the solution briefly. Jeremy, first question is so your solution will carry the rebar to the site, but I think the other underlying question here, since we have such a broad audience, is that the research that you had done and the technology that you brought to this industry is incredibly complex. You sense the world, you develop a map, you might do some path planning or task planning. And then you need to be able to, to manipulate the world around you and do that in a reliable way that makes economic sense. So what was your process for, building the first solution, deciding what features, and can you just tell us briefly about some of the key aspects of the TieBot solution?
Sure. Yeah, there's several aspects that you can kind of talk about. So one is, before you even start any engineering, you've got to come up with the requirements and choose exactly what you're going to do. So I think that's maybe the first most important part, which makes our team a bit unique in that we have Steve, we have his other construction company, and we have strategic partners like LaMar that we can ask questions of. So, choosing what we do, basically how much does the robot do versus how much a person does, is a really important first decision in choosing what the product is, right? So, at Carnegie Mellon or in previous jobs, I was always focused on making the best robot I can that was the neatest, the coolest, the best demonstration I could do. But the focus in a company, of course, is to make a product so that you can make revenue, right? Because we're not going to stay in business if we don't actually, make a product that's acceptable by people like LaMar. So we were very, very strategic and I wouldn't say took our time, but made sure that we didn't rush through what we were actually shooting for this complete system, because the focus is having a complete product system that just does the job, not about producing just the tech, right? So the tech to support the problem, as we've been talking about. So that was an important factor. And then the other one is there was a recent article about Waymo, right, and solving the last 1% problem for autonomous vehicles, and the tail for solving the edge cases can be long. And so we were very strategic, and because of the team that came with me from Carnegie Mellon and the folks we hired, we've been doing robots for a very, very long time. So we understood at the outset what the gotchas are, right? So we were to make those gotcha decisions at the very beginning and not step down that path. So what does that really mean? It means that we understand that that TieBot does not have to perfectly tie 100% of every intersection, because as LaMar can attribute to, if you do most of it, that's still a very, very successful product, right? So as a roboticist, I didn't have to shoot for that last 1% because it's not necessary. So there's a lot of, I'll call it strategic decisions when you're going after a fully autonomous product, not a demonstration, not a proof of concept. You got to make some smart decisions, both in the beginning, but also during the product development process, right? You can't go into the development and just assume you made all the right decisions to start with. There's actually a formalized cyclic product development process that we follow, and we all like it. That leads to products like TieBot.
Unfortunately, we don't have time to go too deeply into your products, so we do encourage any of our listeners to look at your website or to reach out to you, to learn more about that functionality. But a couple quick questions. It's fully autonomous. It's not remote controlled. How does it operate?
Yes, that's a good point. We actually got to make that point to customers. Again, people who are not, I'm used to the word robot. I'm used to the word automation. I'm used to the words AI and machine learning, but the construction industry is not. So we have to make a point to say that this is not remote controlled, which is true. This is not remote controlled. It is, a closed loop traditional robotics system. We have stereo camera systems to see the world and make decisions with computers and to manipulate the world.
And are you able to deploy this? Is it working? One of our listeners, Amit Agarwal, asked, does it work 24 hours a day, or is it scheduled?
So it is capable of operating 24 hours a day. Night, day or night, rain, and LaMar can attribute to that. Of course, we do need to, there is what we call a robot supervisor that goes with it, because you do need to give it gas, right? There's a gasoline generator, as well as the tie wire. We have 15-pound spools. Those have to be replaced throughout the shift, right? So that's one of those, that's the easy one, but if you went after that technical problem of replacing spools of wire, that's a lot of effort to try to do that when it's not necessary if you just have one person with it that does the work of a crew. And
this is the trend in the industry right now, where we're seeing the successful deployments of autonomous solutions where a human is still in the loop and there's a collaborative nature to it. LaMar, can you pick up on that and just talk a little bit about the shift of the workforce, from the mundane or perhaps dangerous task to a more value position, and how are workers responding in general?
Well, I mean, what you have is you've got people that in the rebar installation industry, it's a shorter career timeline. And I've actually, at our foreman meetings and things like that, our guys have said, hey, you know what? We like the fact that you're pursuing technology because it saves our backs, it saves our bodies. So I can actually have a person who would otherwise be ending their career, extend it maybe 10, 15, 20 years, because maybe they're running the machine. They're able to use their expertise, because putting in rebar, it's not just the matter of putting it down and placing it. It's over years and years looking at multiple different projects, and that expertise of, okay, you know what, if you do it through this method, you're going to achieve, 10% faster production. So that's not something that a robot is going to do initially, okay? And if it does, it's going to take a lot of computations and things like that. So you have your human do that, and then the robot's able to go and do that backbreaking stuff over and over and over. It increases your employee retention, okay? Because that's something that, again, it's increasing their amount of time that they're able to work. And then when they go home at the end of the day, instead of being beat up by doing all these tasks, now they are able to play with their kids more. I mean, and that is the communication that I have with a lot of my guys, because they have families, they've got kids at home, and they will tell you after a day of doing traditional rebar install, sometimes you can't even pick up your kids. So these technologies and products are going to increase that and also bring up other people into it, because, hey, it's interesting working with a robot in the construction versus just saying, oh, hey, I'm in construction. So
I think I mentioned to you all during the practice session that I have some familiarity with this. My father-in-law, was a laborer, and he actually tied rods. So this exact kind of task. And I think during his career, this could have been a threat to a livelihood. But what you are facing in the industry is simply not enough labor. And what we know is that individuals are not being encouraged to go into this industry because of this very harsh environment that they work in. So you simply just don't have the labor to do many of the projects. Is that correct?
that's correct, yes.
Yeah. So again, those intersection of trends that has led to the need for this. Before we leave the transformation part of our discussion, I did want to just get to the business case and the economics behind the solution, and a very brief description, Stephen, if you will, about how this technology. We hear labor, and we understand that there are some jobs that are unfulfilled, but we don't always understand what that means to the competitiveness of an organization and the strategic impact of growing that company and to be able to perform, these projects. Can you just tell us what how the lack of labor impacts the business process? And then LaMar, I'd love to have you just tell us about the economics of it. What do you look for, in an ROI, and are these solutions achieving your thresholds?
I think one of the things that we looked at when we were making selections about our first couple products was, we were trying to address critical path issues in our schedules. So, we have schedule deadlines dictated by owners who are looking to impact traffic as little as possible, for example. And so as we were evaluating various product options, we wanted to focus on things that, contributed as much as possible to labor reduction. So TieBot, for example, replaces 4 to 8 people, depending upon the individual's productivities. So as a specialty subcontractor, LaMar's people focus on rebar install. So we might replace, 4 of their people or 5. For a general contractor like my primary company, Bremen Construction, our rebar installation work is just one of many things we do. So our people tend to be more generalists. So when we move them to a rebar install activity, the robot might replace 8 of them because they're somewhat less productive and less practiced than LaMar's crews. So, that was really our focus was, the critical path, improving critical path delivery of our projects, and in turn, reducing the ultimate cost to the taxpayer for the infrastructure installation. And so that's really our long-term goal, is to reduce the cost of infrastructure and improve quality.
And I'm sorry, Stephen, and this makes you more competitive in your contracting process and through the bid process. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, contractors are terribly competitive. Our markets are extremely competitive. So we're always looking for an edge. And I know when I, first started down this this path with Jeremy developing ACR and our products, that I had a lot of contractors asking me questions about, are you just doing this for you? And the answer was no, we're doing this to, to innovate and automate the entire built world. And so our focus and our large scale goal is really to be the leader in robotic development for the construction industry worldwide. And we've eked out a bit of a lead there. I'm sure it's arguable whether we are the leader or just one of them. But we, like the Robotics Association here in Pittsburgh, or the network, feel that we are, a bit of the epicenter of what's driving innovation in construction.
Thank you for that. And some people are asking about how to make investments and questions regarding the development of their startups. And they can always start with us at the Robotics Network as we're developing programs and services. And then we're looking to create tighter connections within this community and the extended community as well. But LaMar, back to you. Can you just talk a little bit about the value proposition and the economics? Because technology can be cool, but if it doesn't make business sense, then it's not really sustainable. What are you seeing in terms of the impact to productivity and the bottom line for projects and businesses?
Okay, so I'm going to approach that answer in two ways. One, just go back to when at one point in time, the construction industry in Pennsylvania even was shut down. So all projects, nothing running. When they started it back up, then it wasn't necessarily a situation of, okay, we're going to start this back up and we're going to give you a whole bunch of extra time. It's kind of, we're starting it back up. We got to get this thing done. Mm-hmm. So we actually had the TieBot on a bridge that was going on in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. And that project, if we hadn't had that machine on the job, it would have been hard to maintain schedule. So, and I had some of our guys and they said, oh, well, we'll be able to stay in front of that machine, no problem. And when they got done, they said, yeah, we stayed in front of it, but we were impressed. So there's a two-prong sales pitch, right? I mean, you got to pitch it to your workers and everything like that. But that was one of the things. And then it spread across the whole company as saying, okay, yeah, we want to see where we can use this thing elsewhere. As far as the numbers, that was proof for me right there, because if you don't have the people to man the job, then it doesn't matter. You're kind of dead in the water there. But the numbers, as far as the productivity, the guys are my really fast hires would be able to keep up with the TieBot for, I'm going to say probably about half a day. Mm. If it is, as the heat of the day goes on and things like that, eventually that machine is going to pass them. And so that's my, fast raw tires. Okay. Everybody is not at the same speed. So when you take that into account, along with the safety aspect, the numbers bear out every single time. And that's one of the things I run those numbers on every single job to kind of see, okay, where do we expect to be? How many man days, how many man hours, and then where the machine comes in there and where that comes into place. But yes, it definitely makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much. Stephen, we have a question, and you knew I was going to broach this subject as well. The question is from James Wang. How do you overcome the inherent conservatism of construction and with so many different stakeholders? And I pose it a slightly different way. Your industry has been coined the last frontier of innovation. I guess it is what it is. So not only are you in a conservative business, but you're also in a largely conservative area of the country, in the Midwest. And you're a business owner, a business leader, but you've got colleagues and peers and neighbors, and they see the adoption of robotics technology. What pushback or resistance have you seen, and how have you responded?
That's a large and loaded question.
Quick answer. We'll save you.
Yeah, a quick answer. I'll do my best. The nature of what we do with infrastructure and what the engineering community designs is, supporting our way of life, and there are always safety concerns. So it is, and contractors are creatures of habit. So, what we're doing is, we're educating and innovating and doing it sort of one company at a time. So, what Jeremy and I have found is anytime we go and do a demonstration for a contractor, once they see it, the simplicity of it wins them over, and they very quickly assess the productivity improvements, as LaMar has in his experience, where they look at it and they're like, this is simple, it's straightforward. We're designing robotic solutions that do not require contractors to change their standard operating procedure. And that's really key at this stage. In the future, we believe we'll produce robots that will be so compelling that the industry will be willing to tweak and change and modify their standard operating procedures. But for right now, one of Jeremy and my focus and our team's focus is really not causing the contractors to have to adopt their process, to adopt our robotic solutions to their current methods.
Yeah, and there used to be a time we didn't have heavy construction equipment, and when we did, it was steam generated, and then we go through hydraulics. So we go through these phases of innovation. But I really appreciate that. Well, real quick, we want to spend some time. We wanted to hear from you, Jeremy and Stephen, about your commercialization strategy. You're developing and you're working closely at the project level, but it's been stated that you may not intend to directly distribute, sell, and service the solution. What's going into this decision in your commercialization strategy? And have you considered things like robots as a service? Real curious as to where you are today and what you're planning.
Yeah, we have considered that. At this stage, our lease model has been effective, and it's been effective because it provides us with a tremendous amount of feedback, which allows us to very quickly iterate our product and solve any problems that develop. So we're moving towards a product that is totally independent and totally reliable. And that's really, it's an evolution that has started from, our first prototype when we put it on a Bremen Bridge project, and we did a bottom mat and we pulled it back in. We got the data we needed. And 3 days later, I got a call from our superintendent who said, when's the robot going to be back? We're ready for you to tie the top mat. And I called Jeremy and I said, Jeremy, we need to get the robot back to the job tomorrow. And Jeremy said, no, we got all the data we need. And I explained to Jeremy, I said, no, Jeremy, they want the robot back to tie the top mat. So we're going to go, basically at that stage, we're like, we've got a productive tool and they want it back, which was really a crossroads.
That was our prototype.
Yeah, that was the first prototype, full size. Yeah.
Well, what's your market strategy? I was going to ask the question, and then we have Deepak Wadhwani that's asking, what other applications are commercially available today and in the process of development? And I think that there's some other detailed questions that maybe somebody could type out a response to Deepak through the chat. But, where's the industry going in your opinion, and where will advanced construction robotics go next?
There's a number of paths we can go. Our leasing model is effective. We're also considering a sales model, and we're also considering the possibility of, this as a service. So where we would have strategic partners such as LaMar, and we have a number of others who, we might negotiate a territory for. So they become the only option for these innovations within a certain geographic area. Joel, it is a dynamic process as we try to determine what is going to generate, the highest and best shareholder value, and again, allow us to continue developing the follow-on products. We haven't touched on IronBot yet, but the second product that we have in development right now will actually carry in place rebar. We're looking at anywhere from a 250 to a 400 times productivity increase as we move that to a commercially viable product.
One of the specific questions was about masonry work, and what about steel erection and areas like that? What do you see beyond your two products as a very viable area for autonomous systems? And LaMar, if you have a vision for this too, I'd be interested to hear.
I think from my perspective, finishing concrete follows on the placement and tying of rebar, so it's definitely on our radar. Steel erection is a very unique process, so I don't see that coming quickly. I think that'll be further down the road. The nice thing about what we're doing is we're freeing up the iron workers who are required to do that complex steel erection or steel repair type work that, frankly, at this stage of our technological development is not a practical use of robotic technology, but there are many.
Yeah, I think that as you get the tools into workers' hands, they will start to adapt and find other ways that were not intended for it to be used. And so that's really what's going to happen.
Okay. There's some really good questions, which we're going to get to here shortly, and I've been able to answer some. A lot of what we focus on at the PRN is not just the technology, and also we're not industry specific. But there are many challenges of building robotics companies today and affecting the overall acceptance and adoption of these solutions. I think what a lot of people don't see is how difficult that is to do inside of a company. You've got one side of the company that's extremely technical, steeped in engineering, advanced engineering techniques. And then on the other side, even though you're an engineering company, you've got business practices, commercialization. Did you do anything purposeful or mindful in developing a culture that combined this experience in the industry as construction professionals with you, Jeremy, as a world-class robotics expert that was working on autonomous helicopters?
I'll take that one. Yeah, I mean, we were very specific. I mean, I think that, again, shout out to the team we have. I like to say we have we innovate and commercialize, right? Because if you just have the innovate, you're not really a company, right? So we really strategically, Steve and I and Danielle, our new CEO, you kind of set up the different segments and you set the culture up. And I talked about this at the product development podcast we did with you guys several weeks ago, is you really got to set up the environment where, and maybe in a traditional just tech company, the tech side always wins, right? Or they have the most people or the most say, right? But that's not how the right decisions are made. The right decisions are made in the argument space between business strategy and the customer or construction operations and what's technically feasible, right? So there was a concerted effort to set up a company culture and a company communication path and leadership structure such that there is a healthy debate, argument, sometimes heated argument to determine, well, should this feature be added or not added? If you're a construction guy, you would say yes. If you're a technical guy, you would say no way, right? So who's right? Well, there is no right. There's a healthy debate to make that decision. So we do have that culture in place, and I think it's awesome. I love it. I love those debates because it's fun. We sit around and we debate it amongst the team, and everybody has strong opinions, and that's a healthy organization.
I think, Joel, defining the team is important too. That the one thing that's been really beneficial for us and allowed us to iterate and develop a commercial product quickly was combining the field construction people at Bremen Construction with our team at ACR and putting them in a room together, and restricting the use of acronyms, by all of the participants, because the construction industry and the robotic development industry have their own languages and their own acronyms. And so
not to mention people from the military, Stephen.
Absolutely. So, by breaking down, those barriers to understanding and making sure that people were communicating, openly and clearly, and recognizing that, half of the room didn't understand a certain language, was very productive for us. And it really let us iterate quickly. So, we made our mistakes and created our solutions very quickly with that hand in glove field interaction that LaMar would provide, and our technical people had the benefit of that resource, and vice versa. So it really, it's probably the special sauce in what we're doing. It's just the fact that, we understand the industry, the economics of industry, the needs, and we also have a world-class team developing, fully autonomous, artificially intelligent solutions.
All right, thank you. So I see Jen, my colleague at the PRN. It's time for questions. And Jen, I know you probably selected a few, but I've seen a couple too, if maybe I can just lead with. One that I think it's really germane to our conversation. The question was asked by Patty Rote. Hello, Patty. Are females interested in the construction industry? And, how does that trend look, and what are the opportunities in what has been mostly a male dominated? And I think this is an excellent opportunity to talk about your executive team and how it's been growing.
Yeah, I mean, the women in construction has been on the increase for some time. I think the stereotypes that existed, 10, 20 years ago have largely been broken down. The implementation of additional technology really helps to pave that way, because we're reducing, some of the physical demands that might prove strenuous, for smaller human beings, irregardless of gender. And some of the things that are beneficial is that there are certain tasks within our construction industry that, frankly, females do better. And so, we are always looking for females entering our engineering area and field construction activities, operating our drills and our equipment. That's a definite equalizer. There's no restrictions in equipment and who's good at operating those types of pieces. So we're definitely building an inclusive organization at Bremen. And I think the industry at large is recognizing that there's a big part of the population that can really contribute. And that trend has increased in the last 10 years for sure.
Jen, do you have a question that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I've actually seen several questions come in here for the panelists related to trends. So Jay, Stephen, Peter, a few of you have asked some questions about, and I don't know which panelists would want to take this one on, but if you have seen a domestic sort of difference, right, in your domestic customers versus the adoption of autonomous solutions in the construction industry globally. And what you maybe advise in terms of for those who are sort of running into some resistance from maybe some of the US or domestic construction trends versus, again, what they're seeing globally.
I'll address that a little bit. My background, one of the areas of expertise is international business, and having traveled abroad and seen everywhere I'm going, I'm looking at construction and seeing how it's being done outside of the US versus in the US. And I think one of the things that you would see outside of the US is more of an adoption of the technology that's out there, sometimes just because they're saying, hey, you know what, if it's going to be able to get it done faster and safer, then let's go ahead and do it. Whereas sometimes in the US, there is hey, we've done it for years this way. And so, this is the process that we have established. And although TieBot has done a very good job of enabling people to not have to necessarily change the way they've done things, you still need a contractor that's willing to work with you for that TieBot solution. So that's become something that we have started out educating the contractors that we work with along that path. But I think you take this outside of the US and you have a different type of reception of the technology out there. So just a personal opinion of mine.
Chime in there briefly on that is, I have traveled internationally for TieBot several times. We were part of an international accelerator program just to get our feet wet on what those market looks like. And, I think in general, yes, the international market is just quicker to adopt new technologies than the US market is. That's been pretty clear in sort of the discussions I've had with international, large international businesses versus, domestic businesses. So that is a trend out there.
I wanted to make sure, and I want to ask briefly because we are coming towards the end, and this is a great subject, and I think that the number of people that have attended and all the different subjects that are coming up in the Q&A, this is just a primer. There's a lot more to talk about this ahead in the future. But I did want to ask, and instead of a long story, if you have some succinct examples of lessons that you've learned so far in your experience with implementing autonomous solutions in the construction industry. LaMar, what would be your biggest takeaway right now, either success or even failure that you're learning from?
I would say that we're at more of the cutting edge of things. And so the biggest success, I guess, is that you're going to have is, even though you're going to have times where you're like, oh my goodness, it's kind of a, why did I do this? You're still going to be ahead of where your competition is. And so we're kind of willing to take those cuts, that cutting edge, it cuts both ways. Sometimes there's cuts and sometimes but overall, there are advantages, and the advantages are significant. So that's the biggest takeaway, I would say, keep pushing those and asking those questions of, hey, why do we have to do it this way? Is there a better way to do it?
Stephen, what lesson do you have venturing into this technology, venture?
I'll tell you, Joel, this has been the most complex business that I've been in yet. And it's been quite a few years with a lot of different businesses. I think the thing that we've learned, or I've learned in this, is to iterate quickly. So make decisions, move forward, make a new decision, move forward, and do that quickly, because as you're trying to develop a new product for markets that don't exist, you're not going to get it right all the time. You're going to try to get it, better than 50% right. And you're going to take a few steps and you're going to reevaluate, tweak your program and move forward. And that's really, I think what's been unique for us is that we have that ability to get industry input directly into our product development. We understand the economic benefits that have to be derived, and we're able to, bring the technology to bear on those things. So I think iterating rapidly is probably the thing that I have learned the most so far.
That is excellent. Thank you. And Jeremy, from the engineering founder perspective, unfortunately, I wish we had more time, because I'm sure you've got some really good stories of successes and failures, but what's your biggest takeaway from your experience so far?
So Steve's iteration is a very good one, but you always have to seed that with a starting point. So we did do this well, but you got to make good decisions on the approach you're taking, or even what product you're going after to achieve. And that only happens, with the right engineering people, the right construction people, and the right business people. So, jumping into a solution or a technology blindly is a big mistake.
Okay, really great. Well, I'm really sorry that we were unable to get to what was a phenomenal list of questions, and our panelists, as you see them, if there's something that you think that we might be able to respond to in our follow-up email, we can, we're also going to do a write-up on this. And so perhaps we can answer some of these questions, in that write-up. This webinar was recorded. We will distribute a link to that, so you'll have an opportunity to share it. Please connect with us if you have additional questions. I do want to mention there are a couple key questions. The company is not selling internationally yet at this early stage. They are going to be raising money sometime soon. So we had some investors in the audience. Feel free, if you can't reach them, we would be happy to facilitate that connection. And they will be hiring. So take a look at their website and look for some open positions. I want to thank all of our panelists today, LaMar, Jeremy, Stephen, really appreciate it. You guys are a leader in our community and worldwide, not only in this industry, but also in the field of robotics. I want to thank our sponsors, our founding sponsors and our sustaining sponsors. I also did not mention or point out our founding members. You can see who those companies are on our website, who also define, our community. And just continue to stay in touch, as we're going to be doing some more programming, and we look forward to connecting with folks in the industry, both within verticals like the construction space, but also generally across the robotics industry. So thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.